Okay, so to begin the day, first of all, I want to welcome everyone. It's a beautiful day here, and I'm very happy to be here at Wat Buddhanusorn, and we're going to talk about speech today, but I thought I would read the description of what this day will be about, since some of you may not have read it before. The title for the day is, What Would the Buddha Say? Peaceful Communication Skills for Difficult Times. And I'm pretty sure I wrote this, but I forgot. And then when I read it again, preparing, I thought, wow, I really promised a lot here. So I want to read it to you. And then if through the day you feel there are things that haven't been addressed yet, I want you to let me know. I want to get into the real challenges that we all face in our communication in difficult circumstances. So the description here says, some of the hardest times to come up with the right words and the right attitude are when the topic at hand is really hot. Maybe it's when we feel there's something very important at stake. Maybe it's when something seems very wrong in the world, like war or political strife, corruption, injustice. How can we use right speech in such circumstances? How can we express ourselves in ways that are truthful but do not widen the divide? How can we promote peace and mutual respect? How can we relate to others with very different views and values with honesty and skill? These are some of the areas we'll explore today, working with personal as well as societal examples, and we'll base our conversation on the words of the Buddha's advice. So the way I've been thinking about this topic is that there are kind of three components that I'm hoping we'll touch on today. And one of them is handling our own emotions. So this is an important part of being skillful in these kind of tough situations where we want to express how we feel or what our position is, but we also want to heal the divide rather than create more conflict. So handling our own emotions is important. That's the first part. The second part is really seeing the situation with wisdom. So we'll talk about that. And then the third part is the skillful speech, speaking and interacting with skills. And so as we talk about this, as I share what I've been thinking about and what I've been working with now over many years, and we start talking about real examples and make sure we cover all of these parts. So when I think about handling our emotions, a lot of times when we have a challenging conversation or an argument, there's a lot of emotional heat. You know, maybe we're angry, maybe we're feeling hurt or sad or in some way upset. Maybe we feel, like we're being taken advantage of or something is really unfair. Sometimes we feel like we have to express ourselves very strongly, like with some anger or resentment, because otherwise it won't get through. But actually, it just creates more harm, more divisive behavior, and it really harms our relationships rather than build them. So how do you work with these feelings? So the advice I would give is that whenever possible, see if you can walk away from the situation with a promise of coming back. So even, if you're maybe having a disagreement with your partner or with someone else you're close to, and you're feeling those strong feelings, it's very skillful to be able to say, I need a little time here. I'll be back in 20 minutes. It's pretty advanced, actually, to be able to do that. And it's very, very helpful. The old saying of count to 10, basically the Buddha would have recommended the same kind of thing. Take some time to calm down before you talk about this disagreement, whether it's taking a series of breaths or just taking some time. When we feel upset, when we feel threatened, when we feel angry, there's a lot of chemicals coursing through our system. See if you can give yourself enough time for that to settle down. And then there's much deeper work that we can do in ourselves to work with our own feelings. Because these feelings don't just arise out of a vacuum. It's not, we may think, oh, this is automatic and this is always the way it's going to be, in terms of, how can I avoid that or do something different? The reality is that it's just coming out of our conditioning. And a lot of times when we have these strong reactions, they might not even make logical sense, but it's coming out of maybe childhood trauma, or maybe even past life trauma. We don't know. Maybe we know, but maybe we don't. The point is, it's old. These strong feelings usually come out of something old. We don't have to really assume that that's important. What we can do, though, is take really good care of ourselves, respecting ourselves enough and the other person enough to pay attention to those feelings and work through them. So what does it mean to work through them? Well, sometimes it really is helpful to have someone else to help us, a neutral third party, someone who's not involved in the conflict or in the discussion, but really is there to listen to us, to hear what's deep inside. But we can also get to the place where we really know how to do this for ourselves. And what I usually recommend, and you can see it in the Buddha's teachings too, where he talks about learning from feeling in the body. So we notice that whatever the emotions are, where do they most strongly appear in the body? If we're angry, maybe there's a tightening in the chest. Maybe if we're afraid, you can feel it in the stomach. This is the kind of thing that really is valuable, because the body remembers that old trauma, and that's kind of like the source of these intense feelings. So when we begin to pay attention to that with kindness and care, they start to unfold and unravel, and we begin to become, over time, with this kind of effort, it's really mindfulness. I really feel like this is one of the most important ways mindfulness gets used, to really be mindful of our own inner experience. And through that, over time, we become much more calm, resilient, equanimous, able to listen to criticism, even a verbal attack, without becoming upset. And we're able to be in triggering situations with various things confronting us without losing it, basically. And to be able to calmly attend to our own inner experience at the same time as listening to someone else's experience. And so, what we're, wanting to do in these challenging interactions is to be able to be kind, to be able to be truthful, to be able to be aware and wise, but without really investigating this. Oftentimes, the position we have is we want to be right. We want to prove our view is correct instead of being happy. You might hear someone say sometimes, I've decided to be happy rather than to be right. Now, I want to make some distinctions around this, because this doesn't mean that we give up our values at all. We don't compromise on the things that are really important, like morality. But instead of trying to push our point of view, we start to open ourselves to listen to other points of view. So I really just made a shift from that first part of handling our own emotional experience to the part about looking at this whole situation with wisdom. So seeing the situation with wisdom actually requires a sense of calm, a willingness to listen to the other person or the other side, whether it's one person or a whole group, a whole nation. It's the openness and the sense of security internally that allows us to really be present and to be able to discern between what's a view or an opinion and what's actually dhamma. Seeing this distinction is very important. So the Buddha talked about this in this sutta in the Middle Length Discourses, number 95, called the Chanki Sutta. One of the people in the sutta's name is Chanki, but one of the main characters is this young Brahmin, very well educated and articulate. And he asks the Buddha a question about the tradition and faith of the Brahmins. And I'm going to read a little bit from this sutta. This gives us the way the Buddha talked to this young man gives us a sense of how we can talk to others. And also what he says is a very good model and guidance for us to know how to work with our views and opinions, our beliefs. Could you close the door, Sherry? Thank you. So when this young man says, the elders in his tradition have these particular beliefs that they've passed down from generation to generation for a long time. And he said, they believe this is true and everything else is wrong. And the Buddha says, can you say, I know this and I see this, only this is true and anything else is wrong? Now, this is a very important question. The Buddha is asking, can you see this directly yourself? Knowing and seeing in the Buddhist language means direct experience. of truth. And this young man says, no, I can't say that I know and see it directly. Basically, he's learned it by being told that this is what's true. Now, how many people and how many times in our own life have we accepted an idea just because we've been told this is true? Can you think of an example? You can answer online or in person. Is there anything that you believe just because you've been told it's true? Yes.
The sun is hot.
The sun is hot. Don't you experience that directly? Okay, that one you experience directly. That's not just something you believe because you were told.
But then, I believe in God.
Believing in God, okay? If
I believe in God, I'll be born in heaven.
If you believe in God, you'll be born in heaven. How many people have seen that directly? I hear a chuckle over there. You haven't seen that directly. Okay, so this is a good example of a belief. Now, it's nothing wrong with having beliefs. The problem is when we say this is true and everything else is wrong. You can see how that puts us in conflict with another person who believes something different. And you're immediately in conflict if we are like, hey, my belief is right and everything else is wrong, and I want to convince you of my belief. This is where we have conflict and growing hatred and a division between us. So the Buddha said, instead of saying this is true and everything else is wrong, when we haven't seen it directly for ourselves, known and seen. So what's interesting about the Buddha's teaching about the Dhamma is that the Dhamma, the truth, the real truth of the way things work, every part of it can be known and seen directly. In fact, it must be known and seen directly. That's one of the definitions of Dhamma. And sometimes our practice isn't at that point where we can know and see directly yet. That part, for a while, we take on faith. If we have the trust in the teacher who's teaching it, or in the Buddha who reported it. So what did the Buddha report? That he directly saw, the night of his enlightenment, he saw eons of his past lives. He saw the passing away and rebirth of many, many, many living beings. And from that, he understood how karma works, how our actions produce results, and it affects our future situation. But most of us can't see that yet for ourselves, not fully, certainly like the Buddha did. So we take it based on our faith in the Buddha, on our confidence in the Buddha at first. So when the Buddha is talking about this, he's saying to this young man, you know, did those people who told you this, could they know and see it for themselves? And he said, no. Did even the people who came up with these scriptures back in the beginning, did they know and they see it for themselves? And he says, no. And the Buddha says, well, isn't it foolish to assume that this is true and everything else is wrong? You can't really make that conclusion. Instead, if you want to preserve truth, you say, I have the faith that this is the way it is. Instead of saying, this is true, everything else is wrong, you just say, this is my belief. I believe this, or I have faith in this. He said, then you preserve truth. So this young man is like, yeah, that's right. That's how you preserve the truth. You just say, where does it come from? Okay, we could say, because of all the things the Buddha said that I know are true, like, what is the cause of death? Okay, who knows? What's the cause of death?
Life.
Birth, life, yes. It's not, yeah, you had the heart attack. Yeah, you got the stroke or the car accident or whatever. Of course, that's what they're going to put on the what is that called? Death certificate. Life, If you're born, you die. If you live, you're going to die.
The circle of life.
Yeah, but we know that as soon as you're born, we're having this celebration, the new baby, so beautiful. That baby's going to die someday. Just waiting for the train to go by. So some of these things we can know and see for ourselves. And then those things about all the past lives, some people I know can see some of their past lives enough to know that what the Buddha said is true, enough direct experience. But for many people, that's not the case. So for the time being, you can say, I believe it, or I'm not sure about it yet, but I have a lot of confidence in the Buddha, so I'm still open-minded about it, or however it is. So the Buddha says there are 5 things that can turn out one way or the other at any time. He said, faith, like you have faith in something. He says you can have faith, even though you have full faith in something, it may be empty, hollow, and false. And even if you don't have full faith in something, it may be true and real and not otherwise. Is this correct? What do you think? I hear heads are nodding online. I mean, having faith in it, if you haven't known it directly and seen it for yourself, it could turn out to not be true, right? Or we could not believe, like I personally have no doubt that there are many lifetimes. And when people say to me they don't believe that, they believe that once you die, that's it. Consciousness is finished. There's nothing else. And I say, well, whatever you believe, whatever I believe, it is the way it is. It could turn out to be true. And then there are 4 other things besides faith that the Buddha said can go either way. Endorsement is the word they use here in the translation. Basically, it's like if all of the people around you have this same belief. Can you think of that? What's your political position and who do you hang out with? If you all have this, if you're constantly talking with other people who have the same belief you have, you start to think it's true. Absolutely true. And then you try to talk to someone who's got a whole different context where they're talking to people all the time who have a very different belief. They think it's true. And then suddenly we're in conflict. We can't see the other side. We even decide that they're all stupid or something else negative. We create this othering over there. And what is it based on? It's just based on the fact that we keep hearing that this is the way it is. So the Buddha said, even if everybody says this is how it is, it could turn out either way. It might be true or it might be hollow, empty, and false. The point here is being aware of this, not holding something to be solid and true when we don't really know. Another thing that can be true or false is oral tradition. It can be passed down very carefully, but it might not be true from the start, which is what this young practitioner was trying to say to the Buddha. This is what's been passed down for generations. It must be true. I remember my grandmother saying, the Bible must be true. It's been here for such a long time. Now, someone might hear this who really, and I grew up in an environment where the Bible was taken to be literal, and I do believe that. And other people who say that's impossible. But if we can stick with saying this is my belief instead of this is the absolute truth, then we can preserve truth. Yes.
I think what's interesting is also the class of language and words on communicating what ideas and beliefs and reflecting what the truth is, like in the example of the Bible, and there's so many different translations. And when the text was originally written, the words that were used, a lot of the meaning has been lost over the centuries. And so in that particular example, it's interesting because somebody can read a text that's translated in a certain way, but you're really kind of just looking at the words as they are now and assuming that the words are exactly even what the intention was.
Hold on just a second. What's your name?
Priya.
Priya. Very nice to meet you. Could you unravel the cord and see if you can set it out here? I'm trying to move the microphone and speaker a little bit so that maybe people online can hear.
We could hear her pretty well.
Good. Some of you hear pretty well and others couldn't. So
Maybe we could have.
let me get the cord. The point here is that the Bible has been translated so many times, and there's such an impact in the way we use words that you can get a lot of different meanings from it. And, it's still, if we're really encouraged to seek the truth, the real truth with a capital T, the one you can experience directly and know by direct experience. And we encourage our children to do the same thing, it takes an incredible honesty with ourselves, because it's more comfortable sometimes to settle on a belief or to have your group that all feels the same way, and to try to encourage other people to take on that same view so that you feel confident and not challenged. If we let go of that, if we let go of that fear of being challenged, and we really look for the truth, we're going to have to examine all those beliefs that we have, all of those things we've been told. And we're going to need to really dig deep in ourselves. But what comes from it is a kind of confidence in what we know that's unshakable.
It may be a confidence, but what I find is also takes a lot of courage, because not that I would be fact, but I put myself outside.
Yes.
It's not belonging the way you can belong to and just get along.
Yes.
Go along.
Could you all hear that online? No. What Elizabeth is pointing out is that it's not just, it's putting ourselves out there away from the group, because when you start to really, and this is very, very true. I know someone right now has been talking with me about really examining her religion of origin and questioning all of the things that she's been told. It's a huge process for her. And there's that feeling of being vulnerable, because now you're setting yourself outside the group. So then you find a new group, or you become the instigator of a new group. And it does take courage. It does take courage. So this is like part of what's so important about today's is talking about how we can be inclusive, how we can be loving, how we can be kind, even when people feel very differently about things than we do. When we really have a very deep difference of opinion, how can we have a conversation that closes the divide? It really rests on our not wanting to change them, not trying to convince them, not letting ourselves be convinced of something that isn't something we can know to be true, but to have that kindness, that caring, that dedication to truth. When the Buddha said, this is in the Santussikā Nikaya, I then wrote down the reference, I think it's 22, no, 12, I'll get to the reference later probably. But in the Santussikā Nikaya, he says, the way I teach the Dhamma, I don't argue with anyone in the world. The world argues with me, but I don't argue with you. He says, a teacher of Dhamma doesn't argue with anyone in the world. Because you're just teaching the Dhamma. You just invite them to come and see. To really take a look. With love and kindness. So this is applicable in every relationship we have. What are the important relationships in your life? Your parents, your children, your partner, your boss, your employees, your friends. Every one of those relationships is crucial to our life. And I don't know about you, but I have a number of people that I'm related to, that I care about, who don't agree with the way I think. I grew up in an environment where the belief was, if you don't argue, somebody's just being submissive. It's either you fight or you like give in. But this is about something completely other. This is about skill, wisdom and skill. This is something that we develop. And it starts with taking care of our emotions and being truthful and honest in ourselves. It is very vulnerable. We try to do that in a safe context. And then to try to see what's really happening in the situation. So when the Buddha was talking to this young man, which we can find in Majjhima Nikaya 95, he said, okay, this is the way you preserve the truth, by saying this is what I believe, this is my what was passed down, this is what my group thinks. And then I didn't get to the other parts of this, because there are 5 ways, right? Faith, the endorsement of the group around us, the passing it down through oral, through to tradition, but also by reasoned contemplation. Like we think about something, we keep thinking about it in a certain way, we come to the conclusion that this is true, when actually we don't have that direct experience yet. Or even the acceptance of a view. I guess that sounds like the same thing. Reasoned contemplation or acceptance of a view after consideration. So you can find a little bit of difference there. I'm not quite sure at the moment what it is. But the Buddha was saying, like, there are these different ways that we accept an idea. Let's be clear about the process we use to get to that point, and not assume that it's true based on that. As long as we can say, okay, I've been thinking about this a lot, and this is how I see it, without saying this is true. He said, this is the way you preserve truth, but he said, this is not yet the discovery of truth. So the Buddha will say these things to someone, but this is not yet the discovery of truth. He just stops right there. The Buddha never pushes his ideas on anyone. He waits for them to ask. So this young man says, well, what is the discovery of truth? As soon as you ask a question, then as soon as this person asks a question, then you have the opening, the invitation to say more about what you think. So when does this happen? So like, somebody the other day came to the door to talk about their religion. We don't have any arguments. We can celebrate each other's goodness. We can celebrate the fact that we share a view on morality. We don't have to try, I mean, in the past, many, many years ago, decades ago, I would have kind of argued with the person. Maybe. Depends on what religion they show up with, I guess. What religion I'm showing up with, I guess. I mean, religion is always one of those really hot topics. Politics is the other one, you know, another one. But what about morality? Morality, there's more of a chance that that's going to fall into the category of this I know and see for myself. I know that if I lie, people aren't going to trust me. Yes, Shari?
So, in this case where someone came to your doorstep and wanted to promote their religion, how do you respond? Like, I've been in situations where people confront me and they say, well, you're one of them, right? And like, you're deluded, you read this and you read that, and those are all lies, and they actually provoke you.
I think we're going to use a microphone out here instead of up here.
Okay.
So do you know how to turn that on?
So,
Thank you, Elizabeth. You just push that little button. It's almost like a recessed.
so my question is, how do you respond when somebody is provoking you to argue, like, you know, like you, like actually accusing you of being deluded or accusing you and your point of view as being wrong, like, I mean, the political situation is a big one, like, wow, the election was stolen. You read the wrong news media, you don't know, you poor person, you're being deluded by what you read. People actually saying that. So how do you respond?
Okay, so this is a very good question. You know, like,
Yeah.
how do you respond when you're being attacked? So this gets into the part of the skillfulness of our speech. And why don't you just hang on to that and pass it to the next person who wants to talk. Whenever there are high emotions, so if someone's saying those things, there's intensity behind that. Rule number one is skillful speech. Whenever anybody's upset, what you do is listen. Listen to them, repeat back what you hear. So it's not, you have to be careful to not say it in a way like you agree, because you don't want to mislead them about what you really think. But you can say, what I hear you saying is that you really believe that the election was stolen. You really believe that I'm, you know, and when you say it like that, you believe, you're injecting this kind of doubt that it's absolutely true, right? Because you're pointing out that this is a belief. Now, of course, we're talking about content here, where you're probably going to know, maybe you'll assume what I think. But don't worry about that, whatever that is. The main thing is to understand that whether it's your child upset with you, or your partner, or your boss, when there's high emotions, calm it down. Calm down, or maybe you've got to deal with high emotions, because what happens, we're like tuning forks, you know, somebody attacks you, you're like upset too right away. Calm it down. Let go of some of the heat. It never goes well when there's heat. We can think, oh, I won that argument. Yeah, what happens next? You get argued with again. Instead, calm it down and do what is sometimes called active listening, where you're listening to what they're saying and you're observing their body, you're observing how they're feeling. Why do people want to attack us? Well, it's not from a place of love and equanimity, is it? That's what we want to bring forth. Kindness, truthfulness. If we're on solid ground with what we know to be true, and most of what we hear on the news, we don't know if it's true or not, or if it's balanced or not. And we got to remember that. And so again, that's the kind of like my group. It's like you're saying, you know, okay, someone says you're listening to the wrong news. If we all really take the truth that there is going to be some truth in it and some bias, if we all recognize that, at least we can say, okay, this is what I think is happening. When it comes to dhamma, when you know that something someone is saying is a lie, what they're believing in is a lie, instead of attacking them with that, trying to convince them of that, listen and repeat back what you're hearing. You're probably not going to come away from that interaction with having changed their mind, but that's okay. That's not our mission. What is the mission? What is the goal in that situation that Shari's describing? It's to remain centered, calm, and loving. Preserving the truth. Yes. Use the microphone, please.
It's very hard.
Yeah, one more time, I think, if you press it.
It is very hard. I think it's almost impossible for me to stay calm and create kindness, not even equanimity when somebody attacks you, because first of all, you feel your response, you feel very irritated, and respond cannot be calm, no kindness, and not even equanimity, you're so much.
This is why we have to practice. And we have to practice when we're not in the situation. And I mean, really practice calming those emotions down. Practice bringing up the situation in your mind so that those feelings arise in yourself when you're in a safe environment, maybe with someone else that can listen or by yourself. I've done this hundreds of times over decades, and it works. I can say.
Practice by meditating.
No, practice by bringing the feelings up in yourself and then working through them. Because why do we feel attacked? It's just words. I mean, if there's weapons involved, you got to take cover, you know, but most of the time it's just words. Another sutta I want to point out is the simile of the saw, where the Buddha talked about the different ways that people can speak to us. He said, there's only five things. It's either true or false, what they're saying. It's either coming from a mind of inner hatred or a mind of loving kindness. It's given at the right time, or it's given in a bad time. And I'm going to talk about what that means, because that's very important when we want to talk to someone about something difficult. Doing it at the right time. Doing it when they can hear, they're not all upset. I can deliver it in a good way, or they're not distracted. And, you know, there's a whole kinds of things that make it the right time or the wrong time. That it's done gently rather than harshly. It's either, if someone talks to us, they can be harsh or they can be gentle. What's the fifth one? What I miss? You people know what these are. The timing, the truth or false, loving kindness or inner hatred, gentle or harsh.
Helpful.
Yes, beneficial or not, for a good purpose. Well, if the purpose is, I want you to think like me, or I want to put you down, I want to make myself superior. Making ourselves superior is a lot of what we are doing when we're trying to get everybody to believe what we believe. My group is the one that knows. I am better than someone else. when we really unpack this whole thing about skillful speech, we turn out to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-caste, anything else you've got. And what that means is you're not just, well, I'm not racist because, you know, half my family's Asian, which is true, but that doesn't make me not racist. What I have to do is be anti-racist. When someone is being racist by saying racist things, putting down another group, being, you know, giving those microaggressions, I have to stand up and say something. I have to say something. I have to work against that. And the Buddha did that. He was anti-racist. I mean, there wasn't racism. Racism didn't happen yet at the time of the Buddha. The caste was there. There's always something with human beings, some way that we want to put our group above. Sometimes we want to put ourselves below because that's kind of the safest thing to do. Sometimes we want to think we're equal. The Buddha said any of those is the wrong idea. Stop comparing yourself to someone else.
I have a couple of things. People online can't hear with the mic, it's too echoey still.
Uh-oh,
Can we hear each other in the room without the mic? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good.
But
So
then they can't hear. I thought we'd try that. Okay,
They're saying it's better with
just
without the
people.
mic,
Okay.
which is, it's just.
Thank you.
softer, but not echoey. And the other thing is Mayor's had a hand up for a while.
Oh, sorry, Mira. Okay, Mayor.
Just on the same subject, maybe it's just you could repeat the question or the comment that somebody makes, and that would make it.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have a question or a comment. Because in dealing with people that are attacking you, I feel like there's always a right and wrong. Is that wrong? And then sometimes I do want to talk back and telling them that I'm not taking it. This example is something about races. I kind of had a patient, I worked in the hospital, had a patient came out, and then he saw me, and he was like, "You're Chinese." And then he was like, "You're one of them. I don't like you." He might have confused, but there's some truth into what he said. I was like, "Oh, what about the Chinese?"
What?
I said, "What about the Chinese?"
Oh, okay.
And he said, "You're not friends." And then I said, "You know what? I don't want to be friends with you either." I mean, I said it jokingly, but I wasn't that angry because he's in a status where he's not helping himself.
He's not what?
He's not helping himself. He's still kind of
Oh, okay.
He's not quite himself.
Quite himself.
So I guess my question is, I could not understand that. I do
Right.
all that.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's a good way of saying this is my boundary.
So this is a good example. The question is around, what if someone says something to you that in this case is racist? The situation was working in a hospital. This person said, "Oh, you're Chinese. I don't like you. I don't want to be your friend." Well, one of the things that was noticed is this person had some medication. They weren't really quite themselves, probably. But what do? You don't want to just take that. And what I would recommend, first of all, is this is a great example to take into your personal practice. So regardless of how you responded at the time, later on, reflect on it and think about, well, what would I really like to say in this situation? What could I say that might just open a crack of light in this person's mind and at least be a stance where I know that I'm solid and I don't have to just take this, right? It's like a lot of times when we fight back, it's because we feel like we're being oppressed or taken advantage of, and we may be being oppressed and taking advantage of. So we want to be able to, first of all, remember a bigger context. I'm not really being harmed here. Maybe I don't have to do anything about this. You know, like this is where the Buddha comes to in the simile of the saw. He said, there are those 5 ways people can talk to you. This is not for a beneficial purpose, the way this person spoke. You know, it's for and it's not coming from a heart of loving kindness, and it's not true, and it's not timely. This is just wrong in all kinds of ways. So the Buddha, with the conclusion he comes to in the simile of the saw is just, you don't have to argue with such a person. You don't have to let any of that hurt you. Just know that that's what's happening over there. And we make our speech true from a heart of loving kindness, gentle rather than harsh. Sometimes there is a need to be sharp, overtly, to help somebody kind of wake up a little bit. But if it's done with kindness, it's very different than if it's done with an attitude. So we want to really take this example and see if we can do what the Buddha said. He said, so if people, no matter what they say, how they say it, where they're coming from, we don't have to take offense. In fact, let me read the way the Buddha said this. He said, there are these 5 ways in which others might criticize you. Their speech may be timely, excuse me. Their speech may be timely or untimely, true or false, gentle or harsh, beneficial or harmful, from a heart of love or from secret hate, or maybe not even secret hate. When others criticize you, they may do it in these ways. If that happens, this is how you should train. Our minds will remain unaffected. We will blurt out no bad words. We will remain full of compassion with a heart of love and no secret hate. We'll meditate spreading a heart of love to that person. And with them as the basis, we will meditate spreading a heart like the earth to everyone in the world. So the Buddha talked about the elements. Abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. This is how you should train. Oh, thank you.
May I ask a question since I'm Chinese?
Yes. If you're Chinese and you get this kind of,
If I were in a situation, talk back without anger, I myself know that I would have responded.
right. Well, you can respond. The Buddha's not saying don't respond. He's saying don't respond with hatred. Don't respond with anger.
So this is how I would respond without anger.
Okay.
If he said, oh, you Chinese, you one of the Chinese, I don't like you. I'm going to turn around and say, yes, I am Chinese, but you don't have to like me.
Yeah, very nice.
But you don't have to like me.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my job. I can like myself and you can like yourself.
So the place where you've gotten
Yeah,
to
you
with
have to
this
like me. I'm
is, yes, I am. The response, just for everybody online, the response would have been, yes, I am Chinese, but you don't have to like me.
Exactly.
And if there's that loving kind, you can hear it in the voice.
Mhm.
You don't have to like me. Embrace. Don't push away. Don't embrace immorality. Be clear. Stand for what's right, what's really right, but not without the harshness. If we use those same 5 things, if we say what's true, if we do it with kindness, like I said, sometimes there's another place where the Buddha talks about sometimes you have to say things a little sharply, but not in this case. You've got this person who's under medication, or, like sometimes you just see the suffering in someone when they're attacking you. And if it's just verbal, so what do? As the Buddha said, okay, if you can handle all speech in that way, he said, even if bandits come with a 2-handled saw and they're sawing off your arms and legs, if a thought of of hatred arises in your mind, you're not following my teachings. Well, that's a pretty high bar. But that's what gives us the motivation to really work with our speech. He said, if that's the bar, what can you hear that's going to be upsetting? What could ever make you respond with anger, respond with harshness?
That's very extreme, though, something so.
Yeah, it's extreme, but it's doable. For speech, it's doable. So remember these relationships. If it's our child, if it's our partner, if it's our boss or our employee, if it's our friend, if it's our parent. I had a hard time in my relationship with my mom. It was really coming out of this old trauma. And I would feel bad afterwards, snap at her. And then, God, I'm talking to this old lady. And it's like, what's wrong with me? It requires going through in private, going through that scenario, feeling that feeling. Then I could get to the point where, okay, I know if this happens, she's going to say that, and I'm going to feel this flare up inside. And then you get to the point where you can hold that. There's the flare up. It's good to prepare yourself before you go into the situation. Okay, that's going to happen. And this flare up is going to come inside. And I'm not going to speak from that place. I'm just not going to speak from that place. Figure out what it'll take to speak from a different place. Even if that feeling is there. The Buddha really wanted us, in other suttas, you'll see it. Don't believe in your feelings. You don't have to act from that place. Our feelings, our perceptions, our views, they're all faulty. Don't think that this is the ground we want to stand on. We want to stand on dhamma, speak according to dhamma, respond according to dhamma. And that takes some effort to know the difference. This is how wisdom develops. This is how we have to develop in our mind so that when we're in the tough situation, we can do it with skill. Did you want to say something?
Well, you answered it actually. I understand the goal is to have loving kindness and equanimity, but if you're not there and somebody says something to you and you recognize, I can feel the anger and all, and I'm pretty good. So basically, sometimes the best thing I can do is say nothing.
Yes.
And I don't feel like I'm being submissive or anything. I feel wise and I feel like I'm taking care of myself. But that was the question. When you haven't arrived at the place where you respond the way you want to, then you kind of have to improvise.
Yes. Well, restraint.
Restraint.
Use restraint. And like you said, you can know that you're taking care of yourself. You're not submitting to this harshness. You're just using wisdom and restraint. And the mindfulness has to be really strong to know what you're feeling, to know where you're coming from, and your mindfulness of what's happening over there. And when you're developed, as you develop, you start to see with compassion, like the Buddha said. You start to see the suffering in this other person and their desperation to have you believe the same thing they believe, or for them to be right, for them to be superior. And you know that underneath that it's a crumbling foundation. There's no reason, when people are mean, it's because they're suffering. Happy, contented people don't hurt other people.
Very good point.
And so can we listen to them? If it's someone close to us, maybe we can listen to them and there's this little opening that comes that has some healing in it. And so one of the things I really want to emphasize is we got to stop trying to change people. Because when we think we're going to change somebody, we're taking a superior attitude. I know how it should be, and I'm going to change you. The Buddha didn't try to change people. He did change. People did change because of him. But it's not like he always, we want to make sure that we have permission to speak. If the person isn't asking, if they're not offering that permission, it's not going to go very far. And so the way the Buddha did it, even when people weren't asking, is he'd just say something like, yeah, that's not how we think of it in the Noble One's tradition. That's not the way we do it. And then someone, well, how do you do it? Well, then he's got the permission. So just to finish this line of the truth, when the Buddha talks to this young man about preserving truth, we've covered that. And then but that's not the discovery of truth. And then he's like, well, how do you discover the truth? He said, well, you find a teacher and you really look at them very carefully to make sure they're not going to lead you the wrong way. And then you draw close and you listen to what they say. You listen to the dhamma and you take it in and you really contemplate it and you memorize it and you really work it through yourself. And that's how you come to the discovery of truth. But that's not yet the final arrival at truth. And then this young, well, what's the final arrival at truth? And then the Buddha leads it to, this is what you have to know and see for yourself. And you do that by repeating those actions over and over again. You keep working it through. And he said, you have to strive. You'll never come to the final arrival at truth without striving. So that just completes that part. So you know, go back to that sutta, take that up and do it. All of these things are meant for acting, for doing it, for practicing it. If we don't practice these things, and it's not, when we say practice, it's not just meditation. Meditation is important. It gives us the sort of emotional protection and safety and solidity and opening into depths of wisdom, but it's not enough on its own. People can meditate and get into great spaces and not even be moral. People can use energy and be really impressive and not even be trustworthy. So you've got to practice the whole Noble Eightfold Path. And practice means working with those feelings, being mindful of what you're doing, be mindful of what other people are doing, and really develop your compassion and kindness. So you can be in someone's presence who's like way different, coming from a way different place than we are, and you can listen to them. You wanted to say something? How do we? You just say what's true. Like if someone's not being truthful or being forgetful multiple times or whatever, if someone says something that is not true, you can just say, I do not believe that. Leave it at that. If they want to know more, then you've got the invitation to say more. But we can always say, I do not believe that. I do not agree with that. You can say it calmly with kindness, not in an anger. I don't believe. No, that's not going to help. Don't do things that cause them to be more inflamed, but to be able to just say what's true. If we can say and that's true. If I don't agree, then it's true. How can you argue with that? If I say I don't believe it, how can you argue with that? I don't believe it. But that is it's saying what's true. It's putting that kind of like it's standing up for ourselves, but it still can be kind. A lot of times we say more than we need to say. We could take a sledgehammer out to, hit the tiny little tack. We don't need that.
We're very good at it.
We're very good at that. Oh, Mayra? And then I'll get to you, Sharon.
Thanks. Some of my questions have been answered on this chat. I usually can't manage the chat and listening, so it's been an interesting experience. So I think we've talked about this before, but for me, there's like if it's coming at me, like when I receive aggressions or microaggressions from my marginalized places, I could do better or worse in how I negotiate that. When I am a witness to microaggressions or aggressions coming at somebody else, and I'm not in that group and I take myself to be an ally, it's really hard for me to not respond. And I definitely always have some activation, so I get that it would be better to not. And I do believe like that I'm right. So like an example is like, say, maybe like 4 years ago, my dad had cancer and he had somebody helping him, well, helping his wife who had dementia. And I worked really hard from 3,000 miles away to get this person to help take him home from the hospital. And she was working like really hard. And my dad and his wife, I don't think were the most pleasant people regarding how they treat others. And she was a woman and a woman of color. And he was really crappy towards her. And I just couldn't abide with it. And so I challenged him, confronted him. And I mean, it caused a lot of problems, I think more problems between he and I, but I just had to, for my own values and I just think he was wrong in how he was treating her, and I just didn't like it. And it was so rooted in devaluing from like both a racist and sexist location. So, and I think my tone had charge in it because I could feel it now, even remembering it. I mean, I was angry about it and I felt right. And I still feel right in my perspective. And I still believe that his conduct was unacceptable to me. And it's upsetting that like my dad, I have some attachment to him, is treats people that way from that, so okay, that's the basic scenario.
Yeah, it's a very helpful example. And it isn't that we have to be completely without emotion when we're responding, even if we're charged. The point is, if we don't speak from that place. Now, none of us is going to do this right away or many times. I mean, I've been unskillful many times. And we can accept that and not be hard on ourselves, but know that this is an indication to go back and work with, how would I like to respond? How would I want to respond? And we do need to respond. If you're going to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, we need to speak up when racism is happening, when racist comments are being made, when racist actions are being made. We need to say something, but we have to work with how to do it, how to do it in a way that's clear and firm and not attacking.
So I did probably attack a little bit. I wanted him to change his conduct because it was also happening in live time, like how he was treating her.
Can you give up wanting him to change? See, this is really important. You state it, you show it, you demonstrate it without wanting them to change. When we want someone else to change, we're on the wrong track. And this is like true with our kids, like very true with our parents. I tried to change my mom. Boy, that did not work. I had to work in myself. And it's amazing how much people change when we change in the dynamic we're having. And then maybe they don't. If your father goes to his grave with these same attitudes, it's just his karma. You can't take responsibility for someone else's actions. And thank goodness it doesn't work that way anyway. We all have to deal with the results of our own actions only. But our actions need to be clean as much as we can make them. And
what about protecting the worker? Like I felt responsible because I really called her. and pleaded, can you help? And she was like amazing. Like she was
Yeah.
amazing in what she offered and what she did. Like,
I know it's hard. It's hard because it feels so unfair, but you can't protect her from racism and sexism, even from your own father. But what you can do is, like I said, state it, make clear that this is unacceptable behavior, really. It's not okay to be treating this person in this way, but without trying to change it. Just let him, we've got to let people do what they're going to, people are going to do what they do. And you can talk to her.
yeah, I did.
You can, yeah, I'm sure you did. And you can tell them, you stand up in their presence, not in their, in the presence of the person being treated badly. You can stand up when you're not in their presence, and just make clear, with that kindness, with that good intention, with that timeliness, and all of those factors as much as we can. And then we're going to blow it again and again and again. And then you go back and you think, okay, I'm not yet happy with the way I handled that. How can I do it differently? Take yourself through the motions, work it through. Sometimes I've found that I needed to think in such a way that I made the situation even more extreme in my mind to bring up enough feeling in myself to match what was happening in real time as much as I could, so that I could work with it, work with that anger, work with that irritation, work with that sense of injustice internally, to know how to get to that place that the Buddha said we can get to be compassionate, to spread loving kindness, starting with that person and not trying to change them. So this is something that, I don't know what time it is. Okay, this.
So you're on that same thought with your and you just ask
Okay, asking a question is often a really good approach. Why are you treating her like this? This is a very good question. It's like, it's it turns it around from me kind of trying to push my ideas on you to listening to you. If we listen, we're going to get further with it. Okay, so I'm just going to do this for a few minutes. There's this beautiful system called parent effectiveness training that was developed by a man named Thomas Gordon, who was a student of Carl Rogers. Many of you know that kind of like humanistic psychology kind of background. And it's very similar to what came out later, nonviolent communication, if you know that system. But this parent effectiveness training, I was involved a little bit in helping with some of the classes. And this, I recommend to people, whether you're parents or not, if you want to learn skillful communication in tough situations, because I don't know if there's anything much tougher than being a parent, frankly, based on my experience. That's how it feels, or it can be really hard. And one of the things that's so important is that, obviously, is that listening. And most of the time when people come to a class about parenting, it's because they want their kids to do what they want them to do. And that's how they walk in the door. Like, I want my teenager off the technology. I want my kids to listen to what I'm saying. I want them to do their chores. I want them to clean. I want them to flush the toilet. Just whatever it is, right? I just want them to, listen. Okay. So then parent effectiveness training starts with, okay, first you got to identify who's got the problem. If I'm upset with my kid, I've got the problem. Who's ever upset, they're the ones having the problem. So it talks about what you do when the other person's having a problem. You listen. What do you do when you're having a problem? You speak from what you feel, not from what you want them to do. When this is happening, when you're acting like this. This is how it feels for me. And this is the consequence that I want to try to not have happen. Like, you know, you leave your bicycle in the driveway again. You know, it's upsetting to me. I worry that, you know, I'm going to hit it with a car or something, or somebody's going to steal it or whatever. And then, you know, that it's going to be unpleasant and da 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 da, whatever. Okay, so there's this opportunity to listen, and there's this opportunity to repeat back what you're hearing. It's very important, because that gives the other person an opportunity to say what they really meant if it didn't sound like, you know, what they said or what they intended. And, you know, there's this example that was used, like this parent recorded an interaction with their child. Is a child, like I think she was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and she didn't want to go to school. And of course, her mom is like, hey, we got to go to school. You got to get going. And, you know, like maybe she's on her way to work or whatever, you know. She couldn't get her kid to go to you know, just willingly get ready for school. So with parent effectiveness training, it's like, well, don't try to change, I mean, same idea, don't try to change her behavior. Listen to what, you know, like ask, you know, what's wrong? How are you feeling? What's happening there? And listen. So it's a beautiful recording of this little girl then responding to her mom saying, well, when I go to school, then, you know, like you can imagine the kinds of things that could come up. You know, maybe she doesn't feel, maybe she's afraid, maybe she doesn't feel comfortable, maybe the kids aren't being nice to her or whatever. But what actually came out was, when I go to school, then I don't have as much time to spend with you. You know what I'm saying? And then of course the mom could make a special time when she comes home, you know, or, you know, like there's so much that you can do. I lived in a house with someone who had a cat, and I have allergies. And the cat had full run of the house. And I'm like, you know, like I have these 2 rooms on one level, and then there's these other 2 levels, and, you know, is there something we can, you know, and fortunately this other person was able to talk in this way of listening to what I was having trouble with. And, you know, even though they really adored their cat, you know, there was a possibility of making an accommodation for that. We actually put a gate at the stairway so the cat wouldn't, you know, it's not that hard, but if you just argue about it, it damages your relationship. If you just try to tell your kids what to do and you're constantly, you know, telling them what to do, it's gonna damage your relationship. But there are a number of skills in the parent effectiveness training or nonviolent communication that help us to be able to speak and listen in the ways that the Buddha actually did himself, that we can see in the suttas. So I think that's probably more than enough for the moment. And my encouragement for today, and I mean, some of the people tuning in online just are maybe coming for the usual Saturday morning program that we give, but my encouragement for today, for everybody who's continuing, whether you're continuing with a meditation Daylong or not, actually, really reflecting on what we've talked about so far, and think of the situations or the relationships, these important relationships. If you want to see more about what the Buddha said about these relationships, you look at Digha Nikaya, number 31, the Sigalika Sutta, where he talks about how you can have a life where you're really protected all the way around. It's through having these good relationships with your parents, with your children, with your partner, with your boss, with your employees, with your friends, basically everyone in your life, even if they have completely opposite political views, completely different religious views. Hopefully you agree as much as possible on morality, because that's really dhamma. But even if they don't, how to be in relationship where you are in the dhamma and you are learning. We're all learning. We're not going to do it right most of the time, probably, but we are getting better and better and better at it. It's about improvement. You know, it's about connecting with the heart and living as much as we can according to Dhamma and continually moving in that direction with our practice. That's what the practice is really for. And when crisis occurs, aging, sickness, death, insanity, we can come to it with skill. We can be there with a kind of enormous compassion and kindness, regardless of whatever water's gone under the bridge. So reflecting on these things today as we meditate, and then at 1 o'clock, we're going to come back online and come back together here. In the meantime, I know there's a meal prep, and whatever time you have, do walking meditation or sitting here in the hall. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll open it up for more Q&A and discussion. And then after that, we finish with that, we'll do more meditation, and then we'll come back again at 3 o'clock. So that's the timing for online, 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And we end at 4 today.